Hey friends, my name is Casey Crawford. I'm the CEO of Movement Mortgage and founder, and I'm making this video because of some profound events that happened in my organization in the last 2 weeks. Like so many of you across the nation, we have been battling the Delta variant and COVID. And 2 weeks ago, I lost 3 team members across the nation in 1 week. And I was really struggling. Like so many of you all are. And I was struggling for answers and struggling for perspective, for how to love and value our team and how to give them the absolute best perspective I could on this horrible disease and the options we have as Americans to counteract it and to think about the vaccine. And I started a movement really as a reaction to not trusting the big banks in America. And so I'm not a person that trusts blindly in everything the government tells me and everything big industry tells me, and certainly everything big medicine has told me in my lifetime. But I am very blessed and very fortunate to have an incredibly dear friend of mine that leads one of the nation's largest healthcare providers, actually been voted the best healthcare primary care network in the US. And he has one of the largest data sets in the world on treating the elderly. And this is also a man who knows me, loves my family. I know his family. I knew he would speak to me honestly as a man that shares a hope and faith in Christ with me, a similar worldview, and a similar commitment to love and value people and bring them the absolute best perspective that we have that God's given us. So I called my dear friend, Dr. Chris Chen, and the information that he gave to me that I shared with our company changed lives. And I was flooded and overwhelmed with the response of people thanking me for the information and asking for more. So I decided to get out of the way because this is not my professional pursuit. And my dear friend was gracious enough to offer to come speak to any and everyone that wanted to hear his message, to give them his absolute best perspective on this disease and this vaccine. So, Chris, thank you, man, so much for joining us. And I know it's hard to do this, man, to brag on yourself, but I want our friends to know that they are getting credible advice. They're hearing advice from a trusted source, not a social media influencer or an article written by a journalist who's hearing and quoting somebody, but I mean, source advice from a Harvard-trained doctor running one of the largest healthcare providers in the world. So Chris, would you please just establish a little bit about yourself and ChenMed so these folks kind of know the basis from which you're speaking?
Sure. Thanks, Casey. I'm glad to be here. I actually come from a family that are Christians, but also doctors. My father is a physician. My sister-in-law, my brother, we all work together. My uncles, they're all physicians. And the other thing is we're all believers. We created this company called ChenMed because we wanted to glorify God by spreading more love and promoting better health to all that come in contact with us. And we also created ChenMed because we wanted to fundamentally create a care model that is better than the one that is in existence today. We believe that the healthcare system, by and large, has sort of failed Americans. Every year we see that the results are getting worse. Every year the care is getting more expensive. It's getting less personal, getting less coordinated. So we sought out to create a very different model that focuses on prevention, because we believe that you can either have people going to the hospital with bypass surgeries and COVID and pneumonias, or you can figure out ways to actually prevent those things. And so we created a model in order to do that. You did talk about my training a little bit. After I finished medical school, went to one of the Harvard hospitals in Boston to do my medical training, went to Cornell to do my cardiac training. And where I had my first child, we now have 4. My brother has 4 as well, too. So between the two of us, we have 8. And, I left Cornell and had what was the equivalent of about 5 board certifications. And most doctors typically have 1. And so we came back to build this company. And, we've been continuing to grow. We're in about 24 cities today. We have a plan to double that number in the next 18 months. In the last, 6 to 12 months, Fortune magazine actually picked us out to be one of the companies in the world to change the world. Only about, of the 53 companies they chose, 30 were in the US.
Wow.
Companies like Amazon, Google, Tesla, and only 6 in healthcare. And we were one of those 6. So we're really happy about the journey.
Yeah, and guys, this is why I asked Chris to share this, guys, is that he is at the absolute bleeding edge of innovation, of change, and actually created the company because he saw so many things broken. I know so many of us don't trust the information we're getting out there, and we don't trust the source of that information. One of the things that's powerful about ChenMed is they have an incredible data source. They have incredible data on serving the elderly. He does it, I think, at a scale, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's one of the largest data sets in the world, I think, for serving the elderly, and particularly elderly.
It is.
And that's what I asked him to speak from. So I asked him, I knew I trust him. I knew as a brother in Christ, I was like, Chris, can you please give us some information, empirical, scientific, data-driven information on this horrible disease and the vaccines that exist? And so, Chris, if we could, man, I want to jump right in. That's really the first question I had, and one that resonates so much with our folks is first of all, you talked to me about the short-term effects of this vaccine. A lot of people are worried about the short-term effects, and you had some really good news, I think, on that one. Secondarily, people are worried about the long-term effects. That one, obviously, because of the length that we've had this vaccine, we don't know as much about, but you had a great compare contrast with the vaccine and COVID itself. So if you could talk about the short-term effects of the vaccine, the concerns there, and then compare and contrast the long-term effects of this vaccine compared to actually getting full-blown COVID.
So, in addition to being, a devout believer, and in addition to being a sort of a healthcare leader and a doctor myself, I'm also a COVID survivor. I actually spent about a week in the intensive care unit. I wrote it up and I published it, and you guys can look it up. But you're dying in solitary confinement. You're dying alone. And I wrote that experience up. And after coming out from the intensive care unit, where studies have shown about a quarter of the people that come out of the hospital from COVID, from the intensive care unit, come out with PTSD, because it's just so traumatic to die alone or to feel like you're dying alone. So I have all of those perspectives. God has given me that opportunity to feel what it really is to suffer. But let me talk about the short-term effects. So, right now we're dealing with the Delta variant. The Delta variant is far more contagious than the original COVID. Some believe it's somewhere between 2.5 to 3 times more contagious. So initially people thought, well, I don't think I'll get this. You know what? COVID was really contagious before. It is now far more contagious. The likelihood that you're not going to be exposed, in my opinion, is close to zero. So now the question is, would you rather get exposed to a vaccine, or would you rather get exposed to the actual virus? And let's just talk about the short-term effects. The vaccine, it will, for some folks, make you feel tired, give you a headache. You may have to stay in bed for a day. I mean, I've heard those stories before. But ladies and gentlemen, that cannot be worse than what I experienced in COVID and what many people experience in COVID. People believe that COVID is 10 times, and not just people. The studies have shown that it's 10 times worse than the flu. So any of you, if you've ever had the flu, and you're asking yourself, well, I think I had the flu, I'm not sure I had the flu. Listen, if you've had the flu, you are positive you've had the flu. You can't move. COVID is only about 10 times worse than that. Okay, so that's the short-term effects. Now let's move over to the long-term effects. Totally agree with you. The vaccine, we don't know enough about the long-term effects of the vaccine. Now, here's what I can tell you. First of all, this vaccine, usually when things get approved and things, are given to people, you usually do them in studies of about, in the thousands, maybe 3,000, 2,000 people. Well, the COVID vaccine was actually tested in millions. Right? We actually have data that actually looked at, and by this point, it's in the tens and hundreds of millions that we're all tracking. And so you have tens to now hundreds of millions of patients of data, and it's safe. All right. In fact, I can tell you there are more people that are dying from Tylenol today, every day, than from the COVID vaccine by a factor of maybe 100.
Wow.
Okay. So just think about that.
On that. That's really powerful. You said that more people die from taking Tylenol. Tylenol can be more dangerous to ingest than this vaccine.
Tylenol, aspirin, any of the things that you think are real simple. I'm going to tell you there are more people dying from Tylenol and aspirin every single day by a factor of some crazy number than the vaccine, because we have more information on the short-term effects of this vaccine than probably any other therapy that we've rolled out in the history of man. Yeah. All right. So that's number one. Long-term. Yeah. Now, long-term. So here's the thing. You're right. We don't know what's going to happen 5 years from now, 7 years from now, 10 years from now. But here's what I do know. We believe people will get exposed. So your question isn't, am I worried about the long-term effects of the vaccine? You should be thinking about, am I worried about the long-term effects of the vaccine versus the long-term effects of COVID? Yeah. And that's scary. When I got COVID, I was actually I'm a triathlete, and I was actually in race shape the day that I came down. I told my assistant, I'm in race shape. And of course, God heard that and said, well, I'm going to show you race shape. And I got COVID. And you know what? Even today, and it's been over a year, I'm still feeling some of the effects of COVID. We don't know what the long-term effects of COVID are. But I can tell you this. The vaccine is just a tiny piece of the virus. It's literally could be less than 1%, maybe even far less of the actual virus itself. That's what the vaccine is. We want your body to react to that less than 1% of the virus, so you can see it again and then you can attack it. Which do you think is going to have worse long-term side effects? A tiny 1% of the virus, or 100% of the DNA, where it's actually RNA of the virus? Right? So, if you're worried about your kids, here's what I feel about the kids, right? All my kids, they've gotten the vaccine. In fact, 2 of my kids have gotten COVID, and I still gave them the vaccine. You're getting the vaccine, right? My brother did the same thing. The only one of my children that didn't get it was the 10-year-old. And that's because it's just not approved for, people under 12. But the day that it's approved, I'm going to march my beautiful little 10-year-old. She's wonderful. I'm going to say, I'm sorry, you're going to get this shot, because I don't know what the long-term side effects of COVID are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Chris, I can echo that. I shared with you a year after having COVID, not even the Delta variant, but the original COVID, I'm still feeling the effects of it. Still, got fatigue, my lung capacity still isn't what it is. And it's man, I'm just so passionate that, man, if we can help people avoid this horrible disease, avoid it. And that's why, I wanted to ask you, and I thank you so much for sharing it, because you're a survivor of COVID yourself. Your family's had it. You're still getting vaccines. And that's what meant so much to me, is that, with the scope and breadth of knowledge that you have, the data that you have access to, the heartfelt choice you made as a daddy, with your own children. And I made the same one. And, Chris, I know, like me, we love that we live in a nation that provides for personal liberties. We both love that, cherish that so deeply. And, this video wasn't an effort to create any mandates, to bully anybody into anything. I hope what you hear is just 2 men who want to express that, we love you, care about you. And we're just trying to offer up the very best information that we have, the way we do for our own families, the way we do for our own families. And again, I'm blessed to have a friend like Chris in my life that I can call, but I know that's not true for everybody. That's not true for everybody. And sometimes we're stuck on the internet or stuck on, tough places to really verify source data. So, Chris, any last parting words for the folks here?
This virus is so scary. The number of, kids that we're seeing now in the intensive care unit. I have friends of mine that are Christians that are running some of the largest children's hospitals in the country. They're coming to me and saying, Chris, in the first wave, our ICUs are empty. Now in this wave, our children's hospitals, ICUs are full. The vaccine does not entirely prevent you from getting the virus. It's not 100%, cure. But here's what we do know. If you do get the virus after the vaccine, the likelihood that you're going to be sick is very, very low. In fact, the data supports that you're likely to have 29 times. This just came out. You're likely to have a 29 times lower, negative consequence from COVID. 29 times. So if you got COVID after the vaccine, which some people do, and you don't feel great, I usually go to those folks and say, I know you don't feel well, but imagine if it was close to 30 times worse. How would you feel? And they all go, oh, I'd be dead. I go, great. The vaccine just saved your life. Mm. So that's an important thing, to really just talk about, is that the vaccine is, again, it's so small. So it's not going to give you that 100% coverage. The only way, the best coverage is actually to get COVID. And nobody wants that. Okay, that is a huge price to pay to have the highest level of immunity. So the vaccine gets you just so much of the way there, and it is credible. I tell people, stop trying to figure out which vaccine is the best one. They've all been crazily studied. Get the fastest one, because even after you get the vaccine, there's a period of time that you're not immune, that you're not protected. It takes time. It takes 2 weeks to get the response from the first shot, and then it takes another 2 weeks. So even if you went and got the vaccine today, you could be spending the next 2 to 4 weeks not covered. So find the safest place that you can go. Where I just cover yourself, wear a mask, because the virus is all over the place. It's crazy contagious. Go into wherever you can, get that shot, be super careful for the next 2 to 4 weeks. And then once you come out of that, you can say, okay, look, now I can relax a little bit because I'm likely not to get the virus. But if I do get the virus, it's going to be a much more mild case, or I won't even feel it at all. And think about that for your kids as well, guys. It's really important. Let me bring up one last story. We talked about COVID. COVID is scary, but imagine dying alone. And I know each of us were like, well, maybe we can do it. But imagine if it was your spouse, right? I can't. Stephanie, she was traumatized. She says, Chris, I didn't think when I dropped you off at the hospital, I'd never see you again. Mm. And imagine if that was your child, maybe that was your teenager, your 15-year-old, by themselves. I couldn't imagine that. So, one of my children going through what I went through. So I would really encourage you to go get the vaccine. It's the right thing for you and your family. I can completely understand why there's a lack of trust, but this is one of those things. This is not where you want to flex that muscle. This is one of the places where I think it's the most clear cut and the simplest.
Man. Hey, Chris, thank you so much, brother. Appreciate your time, your investment, all of us. Anyone listening to this, just, please prayerfully consider what's right for you, your family. Take in the information you've gotten here and maybe weigh it against some other sources that you've been trusting and just kind of go, hey, which one of these sources is more credible? Which one of these sources should I really be making these informed decisions for myself and my family based on? And then go. Man, we're praying for you. We love you. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen.
Thanks, Casey.